I can't move, she whispered. Please, somebody help me. Derek Hollis crouched down to her level, his smile slow and deliberate. Help you. He tilted his head. Sweetheart, I am the help in this town. Emma Carter looked up from the wet ground, her wheelchair overturned 3 feet away, and understood in that moment that screaming would only make it worse. If you've never felt completely alone while surrounded by people paid to protect you, this story is for you. Subscribe to our channel, follow Emma's journey all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling us what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Emma Carter had learned a long time ago that the world does not slow down for the broken. She was 24 years old and she had been in the wheelchair for 14 months. Not that she counted, counting made it heavier. She just got up every morning, transferred herself from the bed to the chair with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had stopped grieving. The motion and started managing it, made her coffee strong and black, and went to work at the Riverside Public Library, where the ramp was slightly too steep and the automatic door had been broken since February, and nobody had fixed it because, as Director Halverson once said without looking up from his desk, it's on the list. Everything was on somebody's list in the Riverside. That was the thing about a town where one family owned the law problems got listed. They never got solved. The library suited Emma. It was quiet in a way that felt chosen rather than imposed. People came in, found what they needed and left, and nobody asked her why she didn't stand up when she reached for the higher shelves, and nobody watched her the way people watched her at the grocery store or the pharmacy, that particular brand of pity that landed somewhere between sorrow and relief. Relief that it happened to her and not to me. Emma had cataloged that look so many times she could identify it from across a room. She had stopped being hurt by it. She had started being bored by it. What she had never learned to be bored by was loneliness. That one still had teeth. Her mother was gone. Cancer 3 years back, slow and merciless. Her father well. Her father was a different kind of gone, and she didn't let herself think about that in the daylight hours if she could help it. She had one friend in Riverside who truly counted Clara Mead, 61 years old retired school teacher, who brought Emma soup she didn't ask for and argued with her about books and never once looked at the wheelchair like it was the most important thing in the room. Clara was the reason Emma had stayed in Riverside after the accident, instead of disappearing somewhere nobody knew her name. That Tuesday in October started exactly like every other Tuesday. Emma opened the library at 8:30, wrestled the door propped with a rubber wedge she'd started bringing from home, shelved the overnight returns, and began processing a box of donated paperbacks that smelled faintly of cigarettes and time. By 2 in the afternoon, the library was holding its usual Tuesday population, 3 retired men who used the reading tables to escape their wives, a young mother with twin boys who treated the picture book section like a demolition site, and a teenager named Joel who came in every day after school and never checked anything out and never explained himself. And Emma had decided months ago that he was simply somewhere safer than home. She was at the reference desk when she heard the voices from the back hallway. The back hallway connected the main floor to the staff storage room and the building's rear exit. It was not a public corridor. Emma had propped the fire door open that morning because the ventilation in the storage room had been failing all week and the smell of mildew was getting into the books. She hadn't closed it yet. The voices were low, 2 of them, then 3. She wasn't trying to listen. She was updating a catalog entry, but the words came through the gap with a clarity that the ventilation system should have earned some credit for. The second shipment confirmed for Friday. Hollis wants it moved before the weekend, no exceptions. The payments went through the county account, same as before. Emma's fingers stopped on the keyboard. She knew that name. Riverside was small enough that everyone knew that name. Derek Hollis, the sheriff's nephew. 29 years old, never held a job that anyone could point to, drove a truck that cost more than Emma made in a year, and occupied that particular social position in a small town that belongs to people who have never once faced a consequence, untouchable and aware of it, casually cruel in the way that only comes from a lifetime of immunity. She sat very still. The sensible thing, she knew it even then, was to close the catalog screen and wheel herself to the far side of the building and let the voices fade into someone else's problem. That was the sensible thing. That was the Riverside thing. She turned her chair toward the hallway instead. She told herself later she hadn't meant to, that her hands had moved before her brain caught up. That might even have been true. She got to the door frame and looked through the gap, and she saw them. Derek Hollis in a gray jacket standing close to a man she didn't recognize. Heavy-set short hair, a canvas bag at his feet, and a third figure she recognized as Ray Pruitt, who worked in the county assessor's office and coached Little League on Saturdays. Ray Pruitt looked like a man who wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Derek was doing the talking. His posture was relaxed. His hands were easy at his sides. He had the body language of someone who had never felt watched because Emma realized with a cold and certain clarity he never had been. And then he turned his head. Not much. Just a few degrees. Just enough. Their eyes met through the gap in the door. Emma had a single second to decide whether to pull back. She didn't take it. She stayed exactly where she was, frozen in that place between action and paralysis that the brain sometimes locks you into when it simply cannot process the magnitude of what's happening fast enough to choose. Derek Hollis looked at her for 3 full seconds. His expression didn't change. He didn't move. He just looked at her, cataloging her the way she'd cataloged donated books, assessing damage and value and what to do with it. Then he smiled. It was the smile of a man who was not afraid. Ado. Emma pulled back. She turned her chair and went to the far end of the main floor and sat behind the tallest shelving unit and put her hands flat on her thighs and breathed through her nose until her heartbeat dropped below the level where she could feel it in her ears. Joel, the teenager who never checked anything out, looked up from the table where he'd been sitting. He looked at her face. He didn't say anything. He looked back down at the table. Emma picked up her phone and held it for a long time. Who was she going to call? The sheriff? She almost laughed. The sheriff of Riverside County was Ray Hollis, Derek's uncle, the man whose name had just come out of his nephew's mouth, attached to a shipment and a payment in a county account. The state police. Maybe, but what did she have? A conversation she'd overheard through a propped door. Fragments, names, nothing she could put her hands on, nothing that didn't sound like a woman in a wheelchair who'd been sitting alone in a back hallway inventing drama. She put her phone in her pocket. She closed the library at 6. The Tuesday regulars filed out. Joel left last, pausing at the door for just a moment, and Emma almost said something to him, she didn't know what, but he was already through and gone. She took the ramp down to the sidewalk and started home. She lived 4 blocks from the library. She'd mapped the route carefully when she first took the job, testing every curb cut, memorizing which sections of sidewalk were cracked and which were smooth. 14 months of practice had made it automatic. Left on 3rd right on Maple Straight, 4 blocks to the building on Elm, up the access ramp in. She turned onto Maple and the streetlight above the alley entrance was out. She noticed it the way you notice something that should be there and isn't. She slowed slightly. The alley ran between the hardware store and an empty commercial space that had been vacant since the floors closed. She passed it every evening. She had never had reason to enter it. She was not trying to enter it now. But the uneven patch of sidewalk, the one she had memorized, the one she navigated by feel, was worse. Something had shifted. Maybe the freeze-thaw cycle, maybe the city crew who'd been jackhammering water mains 2 blocks over. Maybe nothing more than the patient erosion of concrete in a town that maintained its roads the same way it maintained everything else, not at all. Her right wheel caught the edge of the raised concrete seam. The chair tipped. She tried to correct. The angle was wrong. Her weight was already moving, and there was nothing solid to grab, and the chair went over sideways with a sound that was mostly her own breath, leaving her body in one hard syllable of shock. She hit the ground on her right side. She lay there for a moment, just feeling the reality of it. The pavement was cold. Her shoulder hurt. Her hip hurt more. The chair was on its side beside her, one wheel still spinning slightly. "Help," she said. Not loudly. Not yet. She was still in the place between accident and emergency, still in the seconds where you inventory the damage before you start making noise about it. She tried to push herself up. Her arms were strong. 14 months had made them strong, but the angle was impossible. The pavement was too smooth, her grip too uncertain, her center of gravity too far gone. She tried twice. She couldn't do it. "Help," she said again louder. "I can't move. Please, someone help me." The street was empty. The alley was empty, and then it wasn't. She heard them before she saw them. Footsteps deliberate and unhurried, more than one set, and she knew before she turned her head, some animal part of her brain connecting the sounds to the events of the afternoon with a logic that was faster than thought. She knew who it was going to be. Derek Hollis stepped out of the dark with 2 men flanking him. He had changed his jacket. He had his hands in his pockets. He looked down at her with an expression that was almost sympathetic, the way you might look at something small that had stumbled. "Well," he said, "this is unfortunate. Emma started. "You need a lot of things," Derek said, crouching down so they were at eye level. His voice was patient, almost kind. That was somehow the worst part. "But let's talk about what you have first, because right now what you have is a problem." "I don't know what you think you saw," Emma said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "You know exactly what I saw." He tilted his head. "You looked right at me, sweetheart. Don't let's pretend otherwise." One of the men behind him picked up her wheelchair and set it upright. She noticed he didn't move it closer to her. "I didn't hear anything," Emma said. "That's very wise," Derek said. "That's the smart way to go. The smart, healthy way." He paused. Let the word healthy sit there between them. "You're already dealing with enough, aren't you, working at that library? Living alone over on Elm. It'd be a shame to add complications." Emma felt her jaw tighten. "Are you threatening me?" He stood up. He looked almost offended. "I'm having a conversation with a woman who fell down. That's all anybody looking at this sees." He gestured to one of his men. "Help her up." The man came forward and righted the chair and helped her into it with a matter-of-fact efficiency that made it worse, made it feel like maintenance, like something being corrected before it became visible. Derek watched. "You're a smart woman, Emma. The library, the catalog work that takes a certain kind of mind." He turned away. "Use it." And they were gone. Emma sat in her chair on the empty sidewalk and didn't move for a long time. She wasn't crying. She was past crying. She was in the place that comes after crying, the flat, cold place where you look at your situation with complete clarity and understand exactly how exposed you are. She knew something now, something real, something that involved county accounts and shipment schedules and a man who had looked at her like a problem to be managed, and she had no one to tell. She started moving toward home. Her shoulder was already stiffening. She went through the motions of the evening inside lights, water on the stove, pill for the pain she never quite admitted was as bad as it was, and she sat at her kitchen table and opened her laptop and did something she hadn't done in 14 months. She looked up her father. Not the accident, not the official report she had read so many times she'd memorized the paragraph breaks, not the newspaper story that had run 6 inches below the fold with a photo that didn't look like him. She looked up what he'd been working on before he died. Dale Carter had been a county records auditor. Not a flashy job, not a dangerous-sounding one. He'd worked in a beige office in the county building for 11 years, and then one night 14 months ago, he had driven his car into the river on a road he had driven 1,000 times, and the official finding was accidental. And Emma had never fully believed it, and she had never known why she didn't believe it until right now. County accounts. She sat very still with her hands on the keyboard. Outside, somewhere down on Elm Street, a motorcycle passed. The sound of it cut through the quiet, low and heavy, and brief, and then it was gone. Emma closed the laptop. She wasn't going to sleep tonight. She knew that already. She was going to sit at this table and think about her father, and about Derek Hollis's voice in that back hallway, and about county accounts, and what a man who worked with numbers might find if he looked at the right ones. And she was going to think about how alone she was. And she was going to think about what to do about both of those things, because she was 24 years old, and she was not going to spend the rest of her life afraid of a man who crouched down to threaten her at eye level. She had earned enough fear. She was done buying more. She pulled the laptop back open. She started reading. 3 days later, her apartment door was standing open when she came home from work. Not broken open, not obviously forced, just open in the way that says someone was here and wanted you to know it. She stopped in the doorway. She didn't go in. From where she sat, she could see the kitchen, the table where she worked. The laptop was closed, same as she'd left it. A coffee mug that she'd left on the counter that morning was now on the table. Moved. Just moved. A piece of paper was on the table beside it. She went in. She picked up the paper. She read the 4 words written on it in block letters. "Let it go, Emma." She set the paper down. She looked at the mug. She looked at the laptop. She picked up her phone and thought about calling the police for 30 seconds. Then she put the phone down and opened the laptop instead. She found the first thread on a Thursday. It was buried in the public records database that she'd had access to for 6 years by virtue of her library position, a resource that most people didn't know existed and fewer knew how to use. Her father had taught her how to use it. That felt significant now in a way it hadn't before. The County Public Works expenditure log for the last 4 years showed a series of payments quarterly consistent going to a vendor registered as Hollis Property Management, LLC. The payments were for facility maintenance and site inspection services. They were modest enough to avoid audit triggers. They were consistent enough to constitute a pattern. But there was no Hollis Property Management in the county business registry. Emma stared at the screen. She cross-referenced 3 more times. The business didn't exist, the payments did. Someone was routing county money to a shell company, someone with access to the county accounts and the authority to authorize payments. The kind of access that a county sheriff would have. The kind of access that a county records auditor, if he started looking at the right logs, might eventually stumble onto. Her hands were shaking slightly. She pressed them flat on the table until they stopped. Her father had been dead for 14 months. She picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts past the handful of names that represented the entirety of her social world in Riverside. She stopped on Clara. Clara answered on the second ring the way she always did, like she'd been expecting the call. "It's late," Clara said. "What's wrong?" "I need to show you something," Emma said. "Can I come over?" A pause. "Now, if that's okay." "Emma," Clara's voice dropped. "What's happened?" Emma looked at the piece of paper still sitting on her table. 4 words in block letters. The coffee mug moved 3 inches to the left. "I think I know what happened to my dad," she said. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds. "Come over," Clara said. "I'll put coffee on." Emma closed the laptop. She looked at the door she had deadbolted and chain-locked and now could not fully trust. She looked at her phone. She looked at the piece of paper. Then she tucked the laptop under her arm and headed for the door, and for the first time since Derek Hollis had crouched down in that alley and smiled at her like she was manageable. Emma Carter felt something she hadn't expected. She felt angry, not scared, not helpless, angry. It was a start. Clara Mead lived 6 blocks from Emma in a house that smelled like cedar and old paperbacks, and the particular brand of strong coffee that only people who had been drinking it for 40 years knew how to make properly. Emma had been inside that house maybe 100 times. She had never once arrived at 11 at night with a laptop tucked under her arm and her hands not quite steady. Clara opened the door before Emma reached the top of the ramp. She looked at Emma's face and didn't say anything. She just stepped back and let her in. Emma put the laptop on the kitchen table and opened it without preamble. "Look at this." Clara sat down across from her, wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, and looked. She was quiet for a long time. Emma watched her read, watched the small movements of her expression, the slight tightening around the eyes, the way her jaw shifted. "Hollis Property Management," Clara said finally. "It doesn't exist," Emma said. "I checked 3 ways, no registration, no address, no EIN that matches anything in the state database. Just payments. 4 years of payments every quarter right out of the county public works account." Clara set her mug down. "How much per year?" "About $80,000 over 4 years. $320,000. Clara said it flat like she was reading it off a receipt. Then she was quiet again. Emma could see her working through it, the retired schoolteacher brain that had spent 30 years teaching 16-year-olds to think in straight lines rather than circles. "Your father found this," Clara said. It wasn't a question. "He would have. It's exactly the kind of pattern he was trained to catch. Modest amounts, consistent intervals, vendor that doesn't trigger automatic audits." Emma paused. "He died in February, 14 months ago. I went back and looked at his work calendar through the county public records portal. He had access, I have access, and the last project he logged before the accident was a routine audit of county vendor contracts." Clara looked up from the screen. Her eyes were sharp and very still. "Emma, I know. That's not a coincidence. I know that too." Clara pushed back from the table and stood up and walked to the window and stood there with her back to Emma. Emma waited. She had learned over the years that Clara Mead processed difficult information on her feet and that interrupting the process produced worse results than waiting for it. "What are you going to do?" Clara said finally. "I don't know yet, but I needed someone else to see it. I needed it to exist outside of my own head." Clara turned around. "You went to the police?" Emma looked at her. Right, Clara said. Of course not. She came back to the table. She sat down again, and this time she leaned forward, elbows on the table, and her expression had shifted into something Emma recognized from the years Clara had spent dealing with school board members who didn't want to hear the truth. It was the expression of a woman who had decided something. Okay, then we need to be careful. Very careful. Because if Ray Hollis is running county money through a ghost company, and if your father found it, she stopped. Say it, Emma said. Then Derek isn't just threatening you because you overheard a conversation about a drug shipment, Clara said. He's threatening you because you're Dale Carter's daughter, and whoever is protecting this network knows that you exist and that you work with records and that you are exactly the kind of person who would eventually look in the right place. The kitchen was very quiet. They broke into my apartment, Emma said, 3 days ago. Left a note. Clara went still. What did it say? Let it go, Emma. 4 words, block letters. They moved a mug on my counter. Moved it just enough so I'd know they'd been there. So I'd know they could come back. Clara reached across the table and put her hand over Emma's. Her grip was firm. You're staying here tonight. Clara, that wasn't a suggestion. Emma looked at her. For a moment, 14 months of managing alone pressed hard against the back of her throat. She swallowed it. Okay, she said. Yeah, okay. She stayed. In the morning, she went back to work. Because that was the other thing Emma Carter had learned. The most dangerous thing you could do when someone wanted you afraid was to act afraid. Disappearing from her routine would tell Derek Hollis that his message had landed. She was not going to give him that. She opened the library at 8:30. She shelved returns. She processed catalog entries. She helped the twin boys find the dinosaur books their mother requested. She did all of it with the steady, practiced efficiency of someone who had decided that routine was its own form of resistance. It was 10:15 when she noticed the car. Not because it was remarkable. Dark blue sedan parked across from the library entrance. She wouldn't have noticed it at all except that it had been there when she arrived, and it was still there 2 hours later, and nobody in Riverside sat in a parked car for 2 hours without a reason. She didn't react. She went back to the desk. At noon, she wheeled to the window on the pretense of adjusting the display rack. The car was still there. She could see someone in the driver's seat. She couldn't make out the face. At 2, she called Clara from the staff bathroom with the door closed. There's someone watching the library, she said quietly. Blue sedan, been there since I arrived. Clara was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Can you see a plate? Not from here. Don't go outside alone. I'll pick you up at closing. You don't have to. Emma, stop. Emma stopped. Okay. She went back out to the desk. She kept working. Joel came in at 3:15 and sat at his usual table, and Emma realized for the first time that he always sat facing the door. She'd registered it as a quirk before. She understood it now differently. At 4, Ray Pruitt walked into the library. Emma's hand stopped on the keyboard. He came in the way people did when they didn't want to be seen, coming in quickly close to the shelving, not making eye contact with the room. He was in civilian clothes, not his county assessor's badge. He had a folded newspaper under his arm that he clearly had no intention of reading. He came to the reference desk. He stood close enough that his voice wouldn't carry. I need to talk to you, he said. His voice was low and his eyes weren't quite meeting hers. Not here. Not like this. Emma looked at him steadily. You were in that hallway with Derek Hollis, she said, his jaw tightened. I know what you saw. Then you know why I'm not immediately excited about this conversation. I'm not one of them, Pruitt said. The words came out tight, like they'd been held back a long time and were taking pressure to release. It's not what you think. What is it then? He finally looked at her directly. His eyes were tired in a way that went past a bad night's sleep. I've been in this for 2 years. I didn't get in by choice. I got in because Ray Hollis sat across a desk from me and explained what would happen to my daughter's college fund if I didn't cooperate. And I made the wrong decision, and then I made it again. And now I'm too far in to walk out the front door. He stopped, exhaled. But I kept records. Everything they had me move through the assessor's office, dates, amounts, account numbers. I kept copies. Emma's pulse shifted. She kept her face still. Why are you telling me this? Because Derek saw you in that hallway, Pruitt said. And I've seen what happens when Derek decides someone is a problem. I watched it happen to two people before you. One of them left Riverside, the other one—" He stopped again, his mouth pressed into a line. "I don't want it to happen to you." "You're scared," Emma said. "I've been scared for 2 years," he said. "This is different. This is—" He glanced toward the door. "I can't stay. They have someone on this building." "I know," Emma said. "Blue sedan." His expression confirmed it without him saying a word. "Don't go home tonight," he said. "I mean it. And don't contact the local police. Not a single one of them." "I know that too," Emma said. He was already backing away from the desk. "I'll find a way to reach you. Give me a few days. Don't do anything visible in the meantime." He hesitated. "Your father, I knew Dale Carter. He was a good man. I'm sorry." He was gone before she could respond. Emma sat at the reference desk and looked at the middle distance for a long moment. She didn't know if Ray Pruitt was telling the truth. She didn't know if this was genuine or if Derek had sent him in as a test to see how she'd react, what she'd say, whether she'd start reaching for something she wasn't supposed to reach for. She'd read enough to know that was how these things worked. You didn't just threaten people. You also tested them. But I kept records was not the kind of thing a man said on Derek Hollis's orders. She needed to think. She needed to think carefully, and she needed to do it without acting, which was the hardest thing because the anger that had started in her kitchen 3 nights ago had been building steadily, and there was a version of Emma Carter that wanted to take everything she'd found and walk it straight to a news outlet and let it burn. That version would get her killed. She closed the catalog screen. She opened a library database she hadn't accessed in 6 months. She started looking for something specific, a name she'd seen once in the margin notes of her father's last work log. A contact name, someone outside the county, someone her father had emailed 2 weeks before the accident. The name was Marcus Reeves. She'd seen it and passed over it the first time looking for other things. Now she stopped on it. The email address in the log was a personal account, not a county address. The subject line, which her father had noted, was simply, "Need to talk, not on county time." She sat with that for a long time. Marcus Reeves. She typed the name into the search bar and got nothing useful. Common enough name. She added Riverside to the search. Still nothing. She took Riverside out and added county, and she was about to refine it further when Clara walked through the front door. Emma closed the screen. Clara crossed the floor to the desk and leaned on the counter the way she'd been doing for 3 years, like she belonged there, which in every way that mattered she did. "Car's still out front," Clara said quietly. "I know, Pruitt came in." Clara's eyebrows moved. "Ray Pruitt, from the assessor's office. He says he has records. He says he's been coerced for 2 years. He says my father was a good man and he's sorry." Emma kept her voice level. "I don't know what to do with any of that." "You don't trust him?" "I trust him about as far as I trust anyone connected to the Hollis family at this point. But he said something that I can't dismiss. He said 2 people before me became problems for Derek. One left town, the other—" She stopped. Clara was very still. "He didn't finish that sentence." "No." Neither of them spoke for a moment. Joel at his table turned a page of something he wasn't reading. "We need to go somewhere they're not watching," Clara said finally. "Not your place, not mine. Somewhere neutral." "I need to look up a name first," Emma said. "Marcus Reeves. My father contacted him 2 weeks before he died. The email was personal, off hours. My father didn't do things off the record unless the record was compromised." Clara thought for a moment. "Marcus Reeves." She said the name slowly. "I taught in this county for 30 years. I know most of the families." She paused. "There was a Reeves family on the north end. 3 boys. The oldest one, he went a different direction. Left Riverside when he was 19 or 20. People talked about it for a while." "What direction?" Clara looked at her with an expression Emma couldn't immediately read. "Motorcycle clubs," she said. "The serious kind." Emma sat with Ben. Her father, methodical, careful a man, who documented everything in triplicate and kept his coffee receipts, had reached out off the record to a man connected to motorcycle clubs 2 weeks before driving his car into a river on a road he knew by heart. "He was scared," Emma said quietly. "He found what I found and he was scared and he reached out to someone outside the system." "Someone he thought could actually help," Clara said. "Or someone he thought couldn't be bought." The library was closing in an hour. The blue sedan was still outside. Ray Pruitt was somewhere in Riverside with records he was afraid to use. And Emma Carter was sitting behind a reference desk with 14 months of grief rearranging itself into something that felt a great deal like the shape of a question she should have asked a long time ago. She looked up at Clara. How do you find someone who doesn't want to be found? Depends on why they don't want to be found, Clara said, and whether they've got a reason to come out. Emma thought about her father's email. Need to talk, not on county time. Whatever had passed between Dale Carter and Marcus Reeves 2 weeks before the accident, it hadn't been enough to save him. But it had happened, which meant Marcus Reeves knew something. Maybe not everything, maybe not enough, but something. She picked up her phone. She didn't have a number. She didn't have an address. She had a name and a county and a 30-year-old school teacher's memory of a family on the North End. It wasn't much. Emma Carter had done more with less. She started writing things down. That evening, after Clara drove her home through a route that avoided the blue sedan, after she had checked her own door and found it untouched and deadbolted it behind her after she had eaten something she didn't taste, and taken the pill for the pain she still wouldn't fully admit to. She sat at her kitchen table and pulled out the notes and looked at what she had. County payment records, a shell company, 4 years of transactions, a contact name in her father's log, a county assessor too frightened to step forward, but frightened enough to tell her to run, and a car that had been watching her all day from across the street. She added one more thing to the list. Her front left tire in the morning had been flat. Not slow leaking, flat. The valve stem had been removed, cleanly, deliberately, the way you did it if you wanted someone to know it wasn't an accident, but you wanted plausible deniability if they complained. She hadn't told Clara about the tire. She wrote it down now. Date, time, location, condition. Her father's instinct. Document everything. Make the record before someone can unmake it. She was building something. She didn't know yet what it would be. She didn't know if she'd live to finish it, but she was building it, and it was real, and it had her father's fingerprints on the foundation, and that was going to have to be enough to keep her moving. She closed the notebook. She turned off the kitchen light. In the dark, she sat for a moment and listened to the street outside her window. A car passing, wind and something. The distant, ordinary sound of a town that was sleeping without knowing what was running underneath it. She thought about a name, Marcus Reeves. She thought about him in the way you think about something you can't quite see, but can feel the shape of something large and solid that exists just outside the reach of what you currently know. Her father had trusted that name enough to step outside every protocol he'd lived by for 11 years. That meant something. Dale Carter did not do things without reason. She just had to find him. Before Derek Hollis decided that a warning note and a flat tire weren't enough anymore, she found him on a Thursday. Not through any database, not through a search engine, not through the kind of clean digital trail that Emma had been trained to follow. She found him the way people found things before the internet existed, through another person who remembered. Clara had made 3 phone calls on Wednesday evening, one to a woman she'd taught with for 20 years who had a brother in the North County. One to that brother who knew the Reeves family well enough to know that the oldest boy, Marcus, had come back to the region about 2 years ago, settled somewhere outside Millfield, about 40 miles east of Riverside. And one to a man named Gerald Briggs, retired machinist, 70 years old, who had been friends with Marcus Reeves's father until the father died, and who had seen Marcus at the funeral and still had the number Marcus had written on a paper napkin and told Gerald to use if he ever needed anything. Clara had that number by 9 Wednesday night. She didn't give it to Emma immediately. She sat on it until morning, turning it over the way you turned over something you weren't sure was safe to touch. Then she came to the library at opening time and put a folded piece of paper on the reference desk without saying anything about it, and Emma unfolded it and looked at the 10 digits written in Clara's careful schoolteacher handwriting and understood exactly what she was looking at. "You sure about this?" Emma said. "No," Clara said. "Are you, Mama folded the paper and put it in her pocket. "I'll call from the staff room at lunch." She waited until the library had its midday quiet, the retired readers at their tables, no one at the desk, and she went to the staff room and closed the door and sat for a moment with the phone in her hand and the folded paper open on her knee. She dialed. It rang 4 times. She was already constructing what she'd say to a voicemail when the line picked up. Silence first. Then, "Who is this?" The voice was low, not unfriendly. Careful. "My name is Emma Carter," she said. "Dale Carter was my father. I think you knew him. The silence that followed was different from the first one. Longer, heavier, the kind of silence that has information in it. Dale Carter's daughter, the voice said finally. Yes. Another pause. How'd you get this number? Clara Mead, she taught school here for 30 years. She knows Gerald Briggs. She heard him exhale. Not surprised exactly, more like a man who had been expecting a particular kind of news for a long time and was registering that it had finally arrived. What do you need, Oni said. I need to talk to you, Emma said. In person, not on the phone. About what? About what my father found before he died. And about what I've found since. She paused. And about Derek Hollis. The silence this time lasted long enough that Emma checked the screen to confirm the call was still connected. Where are you? He said. Riverside, I'm at the library. I can't move around easily. I use a wheelchair, but I can get somewhere if it's accessible and if I know where I'm going. I know Riverside, he said. You know the diner on Route 9, Patsy's? Yes. Saturday, 10 in the morning. I'll find you. The line went dead. Emma sat with the phone in her lap for a moment. Then she put it away and went back out to the desk and helped a woman find a book on container gardening and didn't let her hands shake until the woman was gone. Friday was the worst day. She didn't know why Fridays were always when things got worse. Maybe it was the end of week loosening the sense that the weekend created space outside normal structures, outside the predictable routines that had kept her somewhat safe. Maybe it was just bad timing. She came out of the library at 6 and found her second flat tire in a week. This time, both rear tires, both valve stems removed, and a long key scratch along the chair's left armrest that was deliberate enough to be almost artistic. She looked at it for a moment. She took her phone out and photographed it from 3 angles. Then she called Clara for a ride and she went home, and she sat at the kitchen table and added it to the notebook under the tire entry from Tuesday, and she went to bed. She did not sleep well. Saturday morning, Clara drove her to Patsy's Diner on Route 9. Emma had been there maybe a dozen times over the years. The corner booth by the window had a table height that worked for her chair. She got there at 9:45 and ordered coffee and waited. At 10 past 10, she was starting to think she'd been wrong about the voice on the phone, wrong about what she'd heard in it, the particular weight of someone who knew her father's name and what it meant when the diner door opened. Marcus Reeves was not what she'd pictured. She'd built something in her mind over the past days. Something large and rough, the way you imagined a man connected to motorcycle clubs, a man her father had reached out to when the regular channels were no longer safe. She'd imagined someone harder than this. He was hard, but not the way she'd expected. He was maybe 50, gray at the temples, gray in the close-trimmed beard, broad through the shoulders, in a way that had nothing to do with effort and everything to do with the kind of life that builds mass without asking permission. He wore a black vest over a dark shirt, heavy tattoos on both arms old enough that some of them had blurred at the edges the way ink does after decades. He moved through the diner without hesitation, but without noise the way certain people moved who had spent a long time in situations where noise was a liability. He saw her. He came to the booth and sat down across from her and looked at her with pale gray eyes that were doing rapid, systematic work, assessing, cataloging, deciding. You look like him, Marcus said. Around the eyes. Emma's chest tightened. She hadn't expected that. People say that. Dale Carter was one of the most honest men I ever met, Marcus said. He said it the way you said a fact, not a compliment. Matter of fact and without decoration. I was sorry to hear about the accident. He put a slight inflection on the last word that told her everything she needed to know about whether he believed it was an accident. Tell me what you knew, Emma said. Before I tell you what I found, I want to know what he told you. Marcus looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up the coffee menu, set it back down without opening it, and leaned forward with his forearms on the table. Your father contacted me 8 weeks before he died. He'd found something in the county vendor records. Payments going to a company that didn't exist. He traced it back as far as he could within the system, and what he was finding told him the sheriff's office was involved. He didn't trust anyone local. He didn't know who to go to. He paused. Someone gave him my name. I don't know who. He called me, we talked. I drove out here and we met in person. Where? Patsy's, Marcus said simply. Emma looked at the table. The same diner. Maybe the same corner booth. Her father sitting exactly where she was sitting now. What did you decide? She said. We decided he needed more. What he had was suggestive, but not enough. He was going to keep digging, put together something solid enough for a state-level contact. I have someone outside the county, outside the Hollis reach. We were going to meet again in 3 weeks. He stopped. His jaw tightened. He didn't make it to 3 weeks. The diner noise continued around them, silverware voices, the hiss of the griddle. Emma let the silence hold for a moment. He kept a work log, she said. You're in it. He noted the contact. I know. That worried me after he died. Whether someone had gone through his records. He looked at her directly. Whether they'd find the name and decide to follow it. They might have, Emma said, or they decided I was the more immediate problem. I witnessed a conversation between Derek Hollis and 2 other men in the back hallway of the library 3 weeks ago. Drug shipment logistics and county account references. Derek made sure I understood what would happen if I talked. She pulled out her phone and showed him the photographs of the keyed wheelchair, the flat tires. She didn't show him the note. She told him about it. 4 words. Let it go, Emma. Someone who knew my name. Marcus looked at the photographs. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very still in the way a body goes still when it's deciding something. Ray Pruitt came to me at the library, Emma continued. He says he has records. 2 years of transactions he documented as insurance. He's scared, but he's not with them, or at least not by choice. He said 2 people before me became problems for Derek. 1 left town. He didn't finish the sentence about the other one. Jimmy Farrell, Marcus said. Emma went still. Who? Contractor. Did work for the county 3 years ago, found out what the maintenance payments were actually covering. Tried to take it to the county commissioner. Marcus's voice was flat. They found him in the creek outside Millfield 18 months ago. Ruled accidental drowning. He was 41 years old and had swum in that creek his entire life. The diner around them went on exactly as it had been. Emma sat with that information and let it do what it needed to do. So my father wasn't the first, she said. Jimmy Farrell wasn't the first either, Marcus said. As best I can tell, this has been running for at least 6 years. The drug network uses the county infrastructure maintenance routes, county vehicles, the assessor's permits as cover. Ray Hollis runs the legal protection. Derek manages the street operation. The money comes back through the shell company and gets distributed as legitimate county expenditure. He paused. It's not sophisticated. It doesn't need to be. When you own the law in a small town, you don't need sophistication. You just need fear. Emma's hands were steady on the table. She was past the point where this information could make her shake. She was in the place now, where information was just material weight and shape and what to build with it. I have the payment records, she said, 4 years of them, documented and saved outside the county system on a drive that isn't in my apartment. Where is it? Somewhere safe. She wasn't going to say Clara's name in this diner in Riverside, not yet. Not until she knew more about this man who'd known her father. I have names, dates, account numbers. I need corroboration. If Pruitt will actually bring what he says he has, and if your state contact is real and accessible. He's real, Marcus said. State investigator, worked organized crime for 15 years. He owes me a conversation at minimum. Emma nodded. She was doing the math, what she had, what Marcus had, what Pruitt might have, what it added up to. It's enough to open an investigation, maybe enough for a warrant if the investigator can move fast. Maybe, Marcus said, but Derek isn't going to sit still while we build the case. The moment he feels pressure, he'll escalate, Emma said. He already is escalating. Keyed chair and flat tires is a man who's moving from warning to action. The next step isn't property damage. Emma knew that, Diane. She'd known it since Friday evening in the library parking lot, looking at the scratch along her armrest. She said, "How fast can you move?" Marcus looked at her. Something in his assessment shifted. She could see it. The moment when someone stops evaluating whether you're capable and starts treating you like you are. "Give me 48 hours, he said. I need to make some calls. Some of the guys I rode with, they're not far, and I need to talk to Pruitt directly. Not through you, man to man." "He's scared," Emma said. "I know scared," Marcus said. "I also know what gets a scared man moving. Let me handle Pruitt." Emma studied him for a moment. She thought about her father sitting in this booth, making the same calculations she was making now. How much to trust a man you've just met? How much the alternative costs if you don't? Her father had trusted this man. Her father had been right to trust him. It hadn't been enough to save him, but it hadn't been wrong. Okay, she said, 48 hours. She gave him her number. He gave her a different number than the one she'd called a secondary line. He said that she should use from a location other than her apartment and other than the library. They finished the coffee without saying much. The bill came and Marcus put cash on it before she could reach for her wallet, not with any ceremony, just with the practiced efficiency of a man who had learned not to make transactions complicated. At the door, he stopped. He looked back at her. Your father told me you were smart, he said. He said you had his brain and your mother's stubbornness, and that combination was going to make you either very successful or very dangerous. Emma looked at him. Which did he think? Both, Marcus said. He seemed satisfied with that. He walked out. Emma sat for a moment longer. She looked at the table. She thought about her father sitting here in this same booth looking at a stranger he'd decided to trust, because the people who were supposed to be trustworthy had already been compromised. She thought about what it had cost him. She thought about what it would cost her. Then she took out her phone and called Clara. Come get me, she said, and bring the drive. The 48 hours passed, then 50, then 60. Emma went to work, came home, documented everything, and didn't hear from Marcus. On the third night, her phone rang at 11:40, not the main line, the secondary number Marcus had given her. Change of plans, Marcus said. His voice had a quality she hadn't heard in the diner, tighter, moving faster. Pruitt called me this afternoon. He's ready to hand over the records, but he won't do it in Riverside. He wants neutral ground, Millfield, tomorrow morning. He paused. There's something else. He said Derek's been asking around about who Emma Carter talks to outside of town. By name. Not just watching you anymore, actively asking. Emma stood in her kitchen with the phone pressed to her ear and processed that. He's looking for you, she said, or for anyone connected to me. Either way, we're running out of quiet time. Another pause. I need you to understand something before tomorrow. Once Pruitt hands over those records and I take them to my contact, there is no version of this where Derek doesn't find out within 24 hours. What happens after that is going to move fast, and it is going to be ugly. I know, Emma said. You don't scare easy, Marcus said. It wasn't quite a question. I scare plenty, Emma said. I just don't let it make my decisions. She heard something that might have been a brief, quiet exhale of acknowledgement. Get somewhere safe tonight. Not your apartment. Take the drive. Don't tell me where you're going. Done. I'll contact you tomorrow after Millfield. The line went dead. Emma looked around her kitchen. She looked at the notebook on the table. She looked at the door she'd been deadbolting every night for 3 weeks with the particular care of someone who understood that a deadbolt was only as good as the door around it. She packed a bag, 3 days the notebook, her medication, her charger, and she called Clara and said 6 words. Can I come back tonight? Already made up the guest room, Clara said. Emma locked her apartment behind her. She didn't look back at the door this time. She was done looking back. She was 3 blocks from Clara's when she heard it. A motorcycle, low and heavy, running slow, somewhere behind her on 3rd Street. She didn't turn around. She kept moving. The sound followed her for half a block, then stopped. She got to Clara's and knocked, and Clara let her in, and she stood in the hallway for a moment with her heart doing something loud and complicated. Someone followed me, Emma said. On a bike, a block back. Clara went still. Emma's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. You're okay, Marcus's voice said. That was one of mine, just making sure you got there safe. The call ended. Emma stood in Clara's hallway and looked at the phone in her hand and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 weeks, or maybe in 14 months, or maybe longer than that. The specific and unfamiliar sensation of not being alone in the dark. She didn't cry. She wasn't the crying kind, not anymore. But she stood there for a moment longer than necessary before she put the phone away. Tomorrow, Pruitt and his records. Tomorrow, the state investigator. Tomorrow, the beginning of whatever came next. Tonight, she was safe. For now, that was everything. Ray Pruitt was already at the Millfield diner when Marcus arrived. Emma knew this because Marcus called her at 8:47 in the morning. She was at Clara's kitchen table with coffee she wasn't tasting and said simply, He came, he brought everything. How much is everything? Emma said. More than we needed, Marcus said. A lot more. She heard something in his voice that she hadn't heard before. Not relief exactly, more like the particular tension of a man who had just confirmed that the thing he suspected was worse than he'd suspected. Tell me. Not on the phone. I'm taking this to my contact today. Directly, I need you to stay put and stay off your regular routes. Don't go to the library. A pause. I mean it, Emma. Today is not the day to be visible. Emma looked at the window. What did Pruitt give you? 2 years of transaction logs, copies of county permits used as cover for delivery routes, a list of names people on the Hollis payroll inside the department, inside the county commission, inside the state licensing board. He stopped. And 3 incident reports that were filed and then buried. 2 overdose deaths that were logged as natural causes. And Jimmy Farrell. Emma closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. He documented Farrell. He documented everything. He's been terrified for 2 years, and terrified men keep records because records feel like insurance. Marcus's voice dropped. The Farrell report has a witness, someone who saw Derek's car parked at the creek that night. Pruitt has a signed statement he took himself, kept it off. Any official channel kept it in a lockbox in his basement. Emma's hand tightened on the phone. That's not just corruption, she said. That's murder. That's murder, Marcus confirmed, which is why we moved today, and we move carefully. My contact is state-level organized crime division. He's been looking for a way into the Hollis operation for 2 years without local contamination. What Pruitt just handed me is the door. A beat. But Derek is going to feel pressure the moment this lands. These things leak. They always leak. We need the operation locked and ready before that happens. How long? Emma said. 48 hours, maybe less. He paused again. Stay with Clara. Don't open the door for anyone you don't know. I'll have someone on the street outside. Marcus. Yeah. Be careful. A brief silence. Always, Emma, he said, and ended the call. Emma set the phone down and told Clara everything. Clara listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Emma had always valued about her, the ability to hold still while information arrived, to not fill the silence with reaction before the picture was complete. When Emma finished, Clara sat for a moment with her coffee mug held in both hands. Jimmy Farrell, Clara said quietly. I remember when they found him. His wife taught 4th grade at Millfield Elementary. She moved away with the kids 6 months later. She paused. Everyone just let it be what they said it was. Because there was no reason not to, Emma said. Because when the sheriff says it's an accident, it's an accident. Until it isn't. Until it isn't, Emma agreed. The morning passed slowly. Emma worked through her notes, cross-referencing everything she had with the names Marcus had mentioned from Pruitt's records, matching dates, filling gaps, building the kind of layered, corroborated document trail that couldn't be dismissed as the product of one woman's suspicion. She was good at this. Her father's daughter built for this particular kind of work, and she understood now with a clarity that felt almost painful why that was, because her father had also been built for it, and he had tried to do it alone, and alone hadn't been enough. She wasn't alone anymore. At 2 p.m, her phone buzzed. A text from the secondary number. Marcus, contact confirmed. Moving tonight. Operation Green. Stay dark. Emma showed it to Clara. Clara read it, set the phone down. Tonight, she said apparently. Are you ready for what comes after tonight? Emma looked at her. It was a real question, and it deserved a real answer. I don't know what comes after tonight. But I know what's happening right now, and I know what happened to my father, and I know what happened to Jimmy Farrell, and I know what would have happened to the next person who looked at the wrong county records at the wrong time. She paused. So yeah, I'm ready. Clara nodded slowly. Then she stood up and went to the counter and refilled her coffee with the brisk efficiency of a woman who had decided to stop worrying about things she couldn't change and focus on the ones she could. You should eat something. Neither of us has eaten since breakfast. They were halfway through lunch when Emma's phone rang. Not Marcus's number, her regular line, a number she didn't recognize. She answered carefully. Yes, Emma Carter, a voice she didn't know, male, older, steady. My name is Walt Greer. I'm a senior investigator with the State Organized Crime Unit. Marcus Reeves gave me your number. I have about 4 minutes, so I'm going to be direct. Go ahead, Emma said. We're moving on the Hollis operation tonight. Joint Operations State Police, 2 federal agents who've been building a parallel case on the drug network for 8 months. Pruitt's records closed the last gap we needed. We have warrants for Derek Hollis, Ray Hollis, and 4 other individuals in Riverside and Millfield. He paused. We need one more thing. We need a controlled confrontation, someone Derek trusts enough to speak openly to, or at minimum doesn't consider a threat. Someone wired in person getting him to confirm the operation on record. Emma sat very still. We're not asking you, Greer said immediately. Marcus made it clear you weren't to be approached for anything operational. I'm telling you because Marcus said you deserve to know the full picture, and because there's a decision attached to this that has your name on it. What decision? Derek Hollis has been asking about you specifically for the past 4 days. He's been telling associates that the Emma Carter situation needs to be resolved before the weekend. We don't know exactly what he means by resolved, but we know what it means given his history. Greer's voice was level and factual, and somehow that made it worse. We could move without the controlled confrontation and take our chances that the physical evidence holds up in court without a direct confession. It will probably hold up. Probably is not definitely. Emma looked at Clara across the table. Clara was watching her with an expression that was completely still. Or, Emma said, or someone goes in wired and gets Derek talking. And probably isn't a factor anymore. He paused. I said we weren't asking. I meant that. But I also needed you to know it was an option, and that if the person who volunteered was you, the protection around it would be absolute. You would not be in that room alone. Marcus would be 30 feet away with 4 other men. Where, Emma said. There's an abandoned farm property on Route 12 outside Riverside. Derek uses it for exchanges. We've had it under surveillance for 3 weeks. He has a meeting scheduled there at 9 tonight, one of his regular suppliers. We would intercept that meeting, redirect it. You'd go in as someone with information to sell, someone scared and looking for money. It's not a stretch given what he knows about your situation. Emma almost laughed at that, not with humor, with the particular dark recognition of someone who had spent 3 weeks being exactly what this plan required, scared, isolated, appearing to have no options. I want to talk to Marcus first, she said. He's standing next to me, Greer said. There was a brief shuffle and then Marcus's voice. Don't do it, Marcus said. Emma blinked. That's your pitch. That's my honest answer. Greer thinks you can handle it. I think you can handle it. That's not the question. The question is whether we need you to handle it, and the answer is we probably don't. He paused. Probably. You keep using that word, Emma said, because that's what the evidence gives us. Probably. Jimmy Farrell's family deserves better than probably. Your father's memory deserves better than probably. His voice was tight. I hate that I'm saying this to you. Emma looked at the table. She thought about the note on her kitchen table. 4 words in block letters. She thought about her father driving down a road he knew by heart on a dark February night. She thought about Jimmy Farrell's wife, who took her kids and moved away from the town that killed their father and called it an accident. I'll do it, she said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Emma, I'll do it, she said again. Not loudly, just firmly in the way she'd learned to say things that needed to be final. Another silence. Then, okay, Greer will walk you through everything. You call me if anything feels wrong, anything at all. I know, she said. The afternoon became the most precise 4 hours of Emma Carter's life. Greer's team came to Clara's house at 4-2 state investigators and a woman named Diane who handled the technical equipment with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this many times. Emma was fitted with a wire that Diane concealed with a matter-of-fact competence that left no room for the anxiety Emma was keeping carefully below the surface. They went over the approach twice, then a third time. What to say, what to ask, how to redirect if Derek moved in a direction they didn't want, what the signal was if she needed extraction immediately. Clara sat in the kitchen through all of it and did not say a single word about it being a terrible idea, which was how Emma knew it was taking everything she had. When the team stepped outside for a moment to communicate with Greer, Clara came and stood next to Emma's chair and put a hand on her shoulder. She didn't say anything for a moment. Your father would be proud of you, Clara said finally, and furious in equal measure. Emma put her hand over Clara's. That sounds right. Come back, Clara said. Just that, 2 words. The way you said something when everything else would take too long. That's the plan, Emma said. Marcus arrived at 6:30. He came through Clara's door and stood in the kitchen and looked at Emma with an expression that she couldn't fully read, something between assessment and something older and quieter that she didn't have a name for yet. How are you? He said. Ask me in 4 hours, Emma said. He almost smiled. Fair. He sat across from her, and they went through it one more time. Not the script, she knew the script, but the real version. What Derek was likely to say. How he processed threats and what made him feel safe enough to be careless. Marcus had known men like Derek for 30 years, had run alongside them and against them, and understood the particular architecture of that kind of confidence, the way it was built on a foundation of never once facing real consequences, and how that foundation, when it finally cracked all the way through. He's going to try to frighten you first, Marcus said. That's his default. He'll come in strong, remind you what he has over you, remind you what happened to people who didn't listen. Let him. Don't react. The moment he feels like he's winning, he gets comfortable. Comfortable people talk. And then, Emma said, tell him you found something in your father's records. Something you didn't turn over. Something that could hurt him, but that you want to use as a trade for money and for him to leave you alone permanently. Make him believe you're more afraid of staying quiet and poor than you are of him. What if he doesn't believe it? He'll believe it, Marcus said, because it's the only version of you he's capable of imagining. A woman in a wheelchair alone working in a library 14 months past a bad accident. In his head, you're already beaten. You just need him to say out loud what he's already thinking. Emma nodded. Okay. Okay, Marcus said. He stood. We leave in an hour. In that hour, Emma did something she hadn't done in a long time. She took out her phone and she looked at a photograph of her father, not the news photo, the real one, the one from a Sunday barbecue 2 summers before the accident, where he was laughing at something off camera with a paper plate in one hand and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had no idea what was coming. She thought about what he'd found, what he'd done with it, how he'd reached out to a man named Marcus Reeves on a paper napkin and tried to build something that could outlast what they were up against. He hadn't made it, but the thing he'd built was still there. She was holding it. She was going to finish it. She put the phone away. They drove to Route 12 in 2 vehicles, Emma with Marcus in his truck, Greer's team in a van that peeled off a half-mile before the property and went dark. Marcus pulled over on the road shoulder and looked at her. 30 feet, when he said, the whole time, you will not be able to see me, but I will be able to see you. The moment something goes wrong. I know the signal, Emma said. I know you know it. I'm saying it anyway. She looked at him. In the months since her father died, she had not had a single moment of feeling genuinely protected. Not by a system, not by a person, not by anything she could point to. This felt different. Not because Marcus Reeves was large or capable or connected, though he was all of those things. Because he looked at her and he didn't see the wheelchair and he didn't see the liability. He saw Dale Carter's daughter with Dale Carter's brain and the stubbornness of someone who had decided that being afraid and being stopped were 2 different things. Thank you, she said, for coming back. For all of this. He was quiet for a moment. Your father asked me for help and I couldn't get there fast enough, he said. I've been carrying that for 14 months. He looked out at the road. Tonight I can do something about it. Emma nodded. She checked the wire one last time. She straightened in her chair. Let's go, she said. Derek Hollis arrived at the property at 8:53. Emma was already there, positioned in the open space near the main building, visible, waiting. She heard his truck pull up, heard the door, heard his footsteps on the gravel, unhurried, confident, in the way of a man who had never once arrived at a meeting where he wasn't the most powerful person present. He came into the light and stopped when he saw her. For a moment, he just looked at her. The calculation running behind his eyes was visible, rapid reassessing the evening's agenda. Then his expression settled into something almost amused. Emma Carter, he said, somebody told me you wanted to talk. I do, she said. Her voice was steady. She was surprised how steady it was. Well, he came closer, hands easy at his sides. Same posture as the alley, same casual confidence. I'm listening. Emma looked at him. She thought about her father. She thought about Jimmy Farrell. She thought about the family that moved away and the record that was never filed and the county accounts that had been bleeding money into a ghost company for 6 years while the town it was stealing from drove its roads and trusted its sheriff and went to sleep at night believing the system was what it said it was. She thought about 4 words in block letters on her kitchen table. I found something, she said, In my father's records, something he hid before he died. She paused. Something with your name on it. Derek tilted his head. The amusement was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Tell me more, he said. And Emma Carter, 24 years old, alone in a wheelchair at an abandoned property on Route 12, with 30 feet of dark between her and the only backup she trusted, opened her mouth and started dismantling the thing that had killed her father. She was not afraid. She was finished being afraid. Derek Hollis had a tell. Emma found it in the first 90 seconds. When he was confident, his hands stayed easy at his sides, loose, and still the body language of a man who had never needed to brace for impact. But when something registered as a variable he hadn't accounted for, his right hand moved just slightly, just a drift toward his jacket pocket, an old habit that probably predated any conscious awareness of it. His hand moved when she said your name on it. My father was thorough, Emma said. She kept her voice conversational, slightly nervous at the edges, not hard to manage because some part of her genuinely was, but underneath it controlled. He didn't just keep the payment records. He kept correspondence, emails he printed and stored off-site, including one from a county commission address to a routing account at Hollis Property Management dated March 4 years ago with your name in the body of the text. Derek looked at her for a long moment. That's a serious claim, he said. I know what it is. Where is it? Somewhere you can't get to it. She paused. Yet, that's why I'm here. I don't want to be in this. I never wanted any part of it. I just want to live my life, and I want to be able to live it without someone removing my valve stems and leaving notes on my kitchen table. She let that land. Let him hear her say it, the note the tires let him confirm in his own mind that she was scared and contained and transactional. I want money, enough to relocate, and I want your personal word that I disappear from your radar permanently. Derek was quiet. His hand had settled. He was thinking, and Emma could see the shape of his thinking, the way a man who had always operated from a position of total control processed an unexpected negotiation. He wasn't afraid of her. That was critical. He was annoyed. He was calculating. But he wasn't afraid, and that meant he was willing to talk. How much, he said. 50,000, Emma said. Cash. I give you the documents. I leave Riverside. Done. He almost smiled. Not warmly. The smile of a man who had just decided he understood a situation he thought was complicated. Your father's copy, he said. Where he hid it. Yes. And these are the only copies. You have my word, Emma said. The silence stretched. An owl somewhere, gravel settling under his weight as he shifted. Your father was smarter than I gave him credit for, Derek said. Honestly, I didn't think he had it in him to go external with it. We moved too fast on him, maybe. He said it with the casual, retrospective regret of a man discussing a business decision that hadn't gone perfectly. Not a confession, yet. Circling. Emma kept her breathing even. He reached out to someone, Emma said carefully. I don't know who. It didn't save him. No, Derek said. It didn't. And there it was, not a full admission, but the shape of one, the outline of a man confirming with his tone what his words were carefully not quite saying. You're smarter than he was, Derek continued. You're here, you're talking instead of playing hero. He tilted his head. I can work with that. So we have a deal, Emma said. We have the beginning of a conversation, Derek said. The documents first, then money. That's how this works. I need to make a call to tell someone where they are, Emma said. They're not with me. I wasn't going to carry them into a meeting with you. Derek nodded. That made sense to him. Of course it did. It was what he would do. Emma reached for her phone and made a show of dialing, and in the 3 seconds she held the phone to her ear, she pressed the extraction signal twice with her thumb and said into the deadline, It's me. Tell him yes. She put the phone away. She looked at Derek. 20 minutes, she said. Good, Derek said. And then with the conversational ease of a man who was comfortable, who was winning, who had decided this was manageable after all he kept talking. That was the thing about men like Derek Hollis. They couldn't resist the sound of their own competence. Give them an audience they decided was contained, and they narrated. Emma had been counting on it. Your father made it harder than it needed to be, Derek said. He wasn't confessing. He was explaining. There was a difference, and Emma understood it, and she also understood that the wire on her body did not care about the difference. He had options, same ones I'm giving you right now. He chose the other road. What happened? Emma said, quiet, careful, like she didn't already know. Derek looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, the assessing look again, deciding how much to give her. He drove into a river, he said. Roads get slippery in February. That's what the report said, Emma said. Reports are useful things, Derek said, when the right people write them. Emma looked at him. Her father's face in the photograph of the Sunday barbecue, the paper plate, the glasses pushed up on his forehead, the way he'd been laughing at something off camera. She held that image in a place behind her sternum, and she did not let it move. Your uncle wrote it, she said. Derek smiled, full this time, satisfied. My uncle is the sheriff of this county, he said. He takes his responsibilities seriously. It wasn't a signed confession. It was better. It was a man who had never once been held accountable for anything saying the quiet thing out loud, because he had decided in this moment, in this abandoned property on Route 12, that Emma Carter was finished as a threat and was now simply an administrative problem being resolved. Emma said, I think that's enough. Derek's smile didn't move immediately. It took a half second, and in that half second, everything happened. The lights came on 3 vehicles simultaneously, flooding the property with white. Marcus came around the east side of the building with 2 men Emma hadn't seen positioned there. From the road, she heard the particular sound of multiple vehicle doors opening and closing in rapid practiced sequence. Walt Greer's voice cut through everything, amplified clear. Derek Hollis, State Police, put your hands where I can see them. You are under arrest. Derek turned. He turned fast, assessing exits the way he'd spent his whole life assessing exits, and he found none. Marcus was between him and the east side. Greer's people were between him and the road. 2 more state officers were coming from the west. He turned back to Emma. For one moment, just one, he looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Not anger, not calculation, something rawer and more unfamiliar. The look of a man whose entire operating assumption about the world had just been removed from under him. You came here wired, he said. I came here from my father, Emma said. His hands went up, not because he'd decided to cooperate, because Marcus was already beside him and the choice had been made for him. Greer's people moved in fast and efficient, and Derek Hollis's wrists were behind his back before he'd finished processing what had happened to his evening. Emma sat in her wheelchair in the middle of the property and watched them take him to the vehicle, and she felt not triumph, not the hot rush of victory she might have expected, something quieter, something that felt like a door closing on a room she'd been trapped in for a very long time. She was still sitting there when Marcus came back to her. He didn't say anything immediately. He stood beside her chair, and they both watched the vehicles and the officers and the organized, deliberate machinery of consequences finally arriving in Riverside. Ray Hollis, Emma said. They moved on him 40 minutes ago, Marcus said. Greer had 2 teams. The sheriff was at home. Apparently, he tried to get out the back with a bomb. He paused. The bag had cash in it, a significant amount. That was helpful. Emma almost laughed. Good. It's done, Marcus said. It's over. She looked at him. Not yet, she said. Not until I hear it from Hollis directly. He looked back at her. That might not happen. I know, she said, but I want to be there when it does, if it does. He nodded once. That was all. He understood what she was asking for, and he didn't try to talk her out of it or protect her from it, and that was exactly right. She called Clara from the property. Clara answered on the first ring. It's done, Emma said. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Then Clara said, come home, in a voice that was doing significant work to stay level, and Emma said she would, and she meant it. The weeks that followed were not clean. Justice rarely is. The arraignment hearings were procedural and cold and smelled like floor wax and recycled air, and Emma attended every one. Ray Pruitt testified at the preliminary hearing with the flat, exhausted precision of a man unburdening himself of 2 years of accumulated weight. His hands shook slightly when he took the oath. They steadied when he started speaking. Emma watched from the gallery and thought that steadying was the bravest thing she'd seen anyone do in a long time. The evidence package, her payment records, Pruitt's transaction logs, the Farrell witness statement, the wire recording from Route 12 assembled into something that Greer's team described without visible emotion as one of the cleanest corruption cases they'd processed at the county level in a decade. The kind of case where the documentation tells the story so completely that defense attorneys go quiet in the first meeting. Derek Hollis entered a plea negotiation on the 14th day. His attorney called Greer. Greer called Emma to tell her as a courtesy because Marcus had asked him to keep her informed. Emma thanked him and hung up and sat at Clara's kitchen table. She was still staying with Clara would be for another 2 weeks and felt nothing particular about the plea negotiation. She had stopped needing Derek to suffer. She needed him to be accountable. Those were different requirements, and only one of them was hers to have. Ray Hollis was a different matter. The sheriff of Riverside County was 63 years old and had held his position for 16 years and had spent those 16 years constructing with patience and deliberation a county where nothing inconvenient could happen to his family without his knowledge and his intervention. He was not a stupid man. He had known Emma believed exactly what he was building and exactly what it cost the Jimmy Farrells, the Dale Carters, the families that moved away, and the stories that stopped being told. He was awaiting trial on 12 counts, including 2 related to obstruction in Dale Carter's death. Emma was in the courthouse hallway when they brought him through for his arraignment. She hadn't planned it. She'd been there for a different proceeding, and the timing had simply landed that way. He came through the door in custody, and she was 15 feet away in her chair, and he saw her before she fully registered him. He stopped. Not by choice, his attorney kept moving, and the officer behind him kept moving, but for the single second that he stopped and he looked at her. Emma looked back. She wasn't sure what she'd expected to feel in this moment if it ever came. Anger, maybe, satisfaction, the particular heat of being seen by the person who'd taken something from you that could never be fully returned. What she felt was something else, something colder and more final. Ray Hollis opened his mouth. The officer behind him put a hand on his shoulder and moved him forward. But in that half second, he said it not loudly, not for anyone else, just across the 15 feet between them. Your father shouldn't have died. He did what was right. I know that. Emma didn't respond. She sat very still and watched him be moved through the hallway and through the next door and out of her line of sight. She sat there for a long moment. Your father shouldn't have died. He did what was right. She had wanted those words for 14 months without knowing she was wanting them. Not an apology she'd given up on apologies from people like Ray Hollis a long time ago. Just the acknowledgement. The recognition that Dale Carter had been a good man doing his job and that what happened to him had not been an accident in any sense that mattered. She had it now. She took her phone out and texted Marcus. 2 words. He admitted it. His response came back in under a minute, I know. I was there. She looked up and found him standing at the far end of the hallway against the wall. Arms crossed, black vest gray at the temples. He gave her a small nod. The nod of a man who had been exactly where he said he'd be, which was the only thing he had ever promised. Emma nodded back. Riverside in the weeks that followed did what small towns do. When the structure that's been holding everything in a particular shape gets removed, it reorganized slowly and awkwardly and with a great deal of uncomfortable conversation. The county commission appointed an interim sheriff, a woman named Patricia Oakes from the state police, steady and competent and entirely unconnected to the Hollis family, who spent her first week reviewing every officer's record and her second week making 2 additional departmental arrests. The local paper ran the story across 6 issues. People who had kept quiet for years started talking. A woman named Denise Farrell, who had taken her children to her mother's house in Ohio after her husband drowned in a creek outside Millfield, gave a 2-hour recorded statement to state investigators and issued a public statement that Emma read 3 times. Jimmy knew what he'd found Denise Farrell's statement said. He told me he was going to do something about it because someone had to. I told him to be careful. I should have told him to find someone to stand with him first. That's what I want people to know. Don't do it alone. That's what gets you. Emma read that and thought about her father reaching out to Marcus Reeves on a paper napkin. She thought about how close he'd come to not being alone, how the timing had simply been wrong, how many weeks had separated him from the moment where things might have gone differently. She thought about herself 3 weeks ago, sitting on that sidewalk with her chair overturned and her hands unable to push herself back up, and her voice going out into an empty street. She had not been alone in the end. That was the difference, the only difference that had mattered. She went back to the library on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after the Route 12 operation. She fixed the propped door. First, she'd ordered the replacement part herself, and a maintenance contractor from the county commission's new vendor registry installed it in 40 minutes. She went to her desk. She opened the catalog system. Joel came in at 3:15 and sat at his usual table facing the door. Emma watched him for a moment. Then she wheeled around the desk and went to his table and sat across from him. He looked up. "You come in here every day," Emma said. "You never check anything out. I've never asked you why." Joel looked at the table. He was maybe 16, 17, thin. That particular quality of careful stillness that Emma had learned to recognize as someone who had spent a long time trying not to take up space. "It's quiet here," he said. "Is it safer than home?" He looked up again. His expression was the expression of someone who hadn't expected a direct question and didn't know what to do with it. "Yeah," he said, kind of. Emma nodded. "Okay," she said. "You can stay as long as you need, and if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here." She paused. "Also, we have new graphic novels in the display case. You might as well read something while you're sitting there." He looked at her for a moment. Something in his face shifted, small, careful, the way things shifted in people who had learned not to let shifts show. "Okay," he said. "Thanks." She went back to her desk. Marcus came by the library on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 days before he was due to head back to Millfield. He came in the way he'd walked into the Riverside Diner, without hurry, without announcement, just present. He sat in the chair across from her desk, the one she kept for patrons who needed help with the catalog system. "How are you?" he said. "Tired," Emma said. "Good tired, the kind that means something happened." She looked at him. "You're leaving." "Got things to handle," he said. "Always do." "Will you come back?" He looked at her steadily. "Riverside is on my route now," he said. "It wasn't before. It is now." Emma Mem understood what that meant. Not a promise of a specific date, a promise of presence, intermittent, reliable in its own terms, the kind that people who live unconventional lives in unconventional ways make when they mean to keep it. "The guys who were posted outside Clara's," she said, "the one on the bike who followed me that night, they didn't have to do that." "No," Marcus said, "they didn't." "Will you tell them thank you from me?" "Tell them yourself," Marcus said. "They'll be around." She looked at him. This man who had known her father, who had sat in this same diner and made a plan that hadn't moved fast enough, and had been carrying that for 14 months, and had shown up when she called without asking anything except what she needed. She thought about what to say to someone like that. She didn't have the right words. She wasn't sure the right words existed. "My father trusted you," she said. "He was right." Marcus looked at his hands for a moment. "He was a good man," he said, for the second time. The same 4 words he'd said in the diner. This time they landed differently, not as information, but as something shared, something that belonged to both of them now. He stood. He nodded to her once. He walked out. Emma watched the door settle closed behind him. She turned back to her desk. The catalog system. The stack of returns. The ordinary machinery of a Tuesday afternoon in a library in a small town that was learning slowly and with difficulty what it looked like to function without the weight of a corrupt system pressing down on everything inside it. Clara came in at 5 to walk her home. They went the regular route left on 3rd right on Maple straight to Elm. The sidewalk was repaired now. The county maintenance crew had come through the previous week, part of Patricia Oakes's first infrastructure audit, and the concrete seam that had caught Emma's wheel on that October evening had been ground level and sealed. She rolled over it without breaking stride. At the door to her building, Clara stopped. She looked at Emma with the expression she got when she was going to say something she'd been holding for a while. "You know what I keep thinking about," Clara said. "Tell me. That night you called me. The first night you said, 'I think I know what happened to my dad.' And I said, 'Come over.' And you came over with that laptop and you were scared and angry and you didn't know what you were going to do next." Clara paused. "You were already doing it. You just didn't know it yet." Emma looked at her. At the woman who had brought her soup she didn't ask for and argued with her about books and never once looked at the wheelchair like it was the most important thing in the room. At the first person she'd called when the world got too heavy to carry alone. "I couldn't have done it without you," Emma said. "I know," Clara said without any false modesty. "That's why I was here." Emma laughed, a real one, the kind that came from somewhere uncomplicated. She couldn't remember the last time laughing had felt uncomplicated. She went inside. She made coffee. She sat at her kitchen table, her own kitchen table in her own apartment, the one she'd come back to after 3 weeks at Clara's with the deadbolt in the chain and the note that was no longer there, because she'd thrown it away the morning she came back because she was done letting it occupy space. She opened her notebook. She turned to the last page she'd written on. She wrote one more entry: date, time. Case referred to state attorney's office for full prosecution. Derek Hollis, Ray Hollis, and 4 associates in custody. Charges include drug trafficking, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and 2 counts of felony murder. Ray Pruitt, cooperating witness charges reduced. Patricia Oakes, interim sheriff, Riverside County. She looked at that for a moment. Then she wrote below it, Dad, I found it. All of it. I'm sorry it took so long. She closed the notebook. Outside on Elm Street, somewhere down the block, she heard the low rumble of a motorcycle idling past unhurried, steady, the sound of someone on a route they'd decided to keep. It went past and faded, and the street went quiet, and Emma Carter sat in her kitchen with her coffee going cold, in the particular stillness of a woman who had put down something very heavy and was still feeling the absence of its weight. She had come into this frightened and alone and unable to get up off the ground. She was still in the chair. She would always be in the chair, but she was not the woman who had whispered, please help me, into an empty street, while a cruel man smiled down at her and believed she was finished. That woman had been the beginning. What came after was everything else. Emma Carter had moved every single thing that mattered, and no one who had tried to stop her would ever make that mistake again.